You're watching Global Trade This Week with Pete Mento and Doug Draper.
Hello, I'm Doug Draper, and with me today is my co-host on Global Trade This Week, Pete Mento. You can see him there in your screen, and welcome. Another weekly edition. Global Trade This Week, as you know, is focused on trade, transportation, a little bit of economics in there, and we'll dabble in some politics today, I think, just ever so slightly, but not too much. And, the funny thing before we get started here, you hear these newscasters and you're like, well, off air, we were talking about this. The amount of crap that we talk about off air before we hit the go button on this thing, it's absolutely comical. So if the record button ever hits early, Pete, I think we're in deep trouble. But,
or
anyway.
we may have the best comedy podcast on iTunes. I don't know.
Yep, that could be it.
But it definitely has nothing to do with trade. What we mostly do is we give Keenan crap about his homemade kombucha and the fact that he's still young and life has not broken him in two yet. That's what this is mostly about. It's the two of us just being a couple of cynical old men. That's what mostly. Or let's not say old, cynical, middle-age-ish old men. How about that?
There you go. I like it. I like the middle-age-ish. So before we jump with our first topic, Pete, this is quite an accomplishment that you have. I want to make sure our audience is aware. You're up to 86 pounds lighter.
Yes.
Say that again?
Yep. 86.5 pounds since January 7th I've lost. Yeah.
That's unbelievable. So kudos to you. And you got a goal of a hundy before you head out to the beach.
Yep, 100 pounds before the end of next month. So we'll see if I pull that one off. And then, I want to go to Hawaii in July. So we'll see if I can, be down 120 by then. We'll see. I don't know. Wow. The problem is, Doug, I can lose all the weight I want, right? This is just the sack of meat that this brilliant mind is in. I'm still going to be just as funny and just as incredible, regardless of how much weight I lose. I mean, this kind of sexy. It doesn't matter what the size of the meat bag is. It's always going to be as incredible. Let's just get to the point with that, right?
Yes. Well, that's a good segue. Sack, knowledgeable. We'll just start with that. Yes.
Yeah, let's start with that.
Four topics we have every week, 2 and 2. So Pete, we'll get you started. Let her rip, my friend.
Right. So the first topic this week was a bit of a shock to me. I'm browsing through the news, and wouldn't you know it, there is a picture of former Senator Kerry, Secretary John Kerry, and he's being congratulated for this supposed agreement between the United States and China to work on climate change, and the supposition here is that the United States, in conjunction with one of our largest, if not the largest trading partner that we have, is going to work hand in hand on trying to control our joint climate change issues. And this was fascinating from so many different perspectives. The first being that we could agree with China on anything right now after the last couple of years that we had. So I think the first thing I wanted to do with this topic was just to point out that in and of itself is a pretty awesome achievement, that we could come to an agreement on anything. The second is that we came to an agreement on something that I'm not really sure is even going to happen. So we have a long-standing history between ourselves and China of coming to an accord on something that over time ends up not happening. The list of this is very, very long. Whether it's working on monetary policy, working on anti-dumping and countervailing issues, working on admissibility standards, blah, 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 blah. We tend to do lip service to things that matter globally, but then once we all are done breaking our arms, patting each other on the back, being congratulatory, very little, if anything, actually happens. And we can point to the Phase 1 agreement between the U.S. and China on the 301 tariffs to see something that really didn't go anywhere. The second thing that I wanted to discuss with this was that it does come out as a win for Mr. Biden because it happened relatively early in the first year of his presidency that he was able to come with just any type, like I said, any type of let's hug it out kind of moment. The third part of this is to show that we were barreling towards these carbon taxes that we keep talking about, and it would require the United States to live up to certain accords. But maybe the Chinese were listening, and they decided that by doing this, it would save them some time. But the last one, if you were to talk to anybody that is really into environmental policy, and you were asked them to, point fingers at the worst offenders in the world about climate policy, most people who are violently anti-climate issues would say America needs to do something about their consumption problems and China needs to do something about their pollution problems. So I don't know, if you're going to do a Marvel team up of the two supervillains, I think, getting out there and making a joint statement that we're going to do better, probably the two best people to do that. Now, whether they do anything or not, time will tell. But at least we can point to the fact that they tried to do something. And what this will mean for global trade, if they actually go down the road and do something together, it would be an excellent moment to try to lead the rest of the world and do making the world a better place. We'll see if that actually happens. And we'll see if the threat of carbon taxes is enough to get some change going on here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Pete, I don't know what to say on that one. When you shared with this topic with me a few minutes ago, the first words out of my mouth were, what? And then the next words were, do you remember the show we did on March 19th that basically had F-bombs dropping up in Alaska? Cyber, the U.S. threatened cyber attack, or didn't threaten, but accused China of cyber attacks, and China was saying that we were having economic coercion and human rights violations. So I don't really understand where this is coming from. So in that vein, I'm going to say it's political. I don't think a damn thing's going to happen with this. I think, like you said, some boxes were checked with Biden to say he came to the table first. But I don't understand it. It's baffling to me. Like, arch enemies, like every time we talk, it's problematic. And yet all of a sudden, it's kumbaya and we want to work together on global change. I don't get it. There's more to it. I don't understand it. So I'm not disagreeing with you, but I don't understand the purpose. And like you said, I think it's going to fizzle. Nothing's going to come of it.
I'm trying really hard, Doug, to not be that bitter old man that tells everyone to get off my lawn this year.
Yeah.
And just for a moment, just for like a brief moment, I want to be the kind of dirt chewing, tree hugging hippie that says, maybe, let's give it a chance and maybe something good's going to come of this. Now, the brutal cynic inside of me is saying, get real. But I'm going to, until I get a reason to believe otherwise, I'm going to be hopeful enough to dream that maybe these two massive juggernauts of trade are going to try to do the right thing. So that's where my head's at. All right. Gotcha. So second topic with global trade this week, brought to you by Cap Logistics. I am handing the ball off to you, Mr. Draper. What you got for me?
All right. So the first one is kind of in honor of you, Pete, because you talk about this one a lot, which would be cybersecurity, cyber attacks. And I think, so my little quip on this is cyber attacks in the roaring 20s. I made mention a couple of shows ago about how we're entering the 2020s and the roaring 20s with the consumption of the world starting to the world opening back up and consumption. Humans are hungry. I alluded to the flappers and Great Gatsby and the Harlem Renaissance and all this kind of stuff. But you got to mix in cyber attacks with there, because I think there's going to be a lot of them. We're going to put our guard down because we're going to be partying and having such a good time with the world coming back to rights. And I think it's ripe. I think we're going to put our guard down. I think it's going to be problematic, and these cyber attacks are going to be prevalent. Now, you made mention of this. So a couple things about cyber attacks is that nobody wants to air their dirty laundry, right? So if your company has a cyber attack, you don't want to necessarily share it because it could impact your reputation and trust with your brand. So the general public doesn't get a lot of visibility. There's some cyber attacks that I was aware of for some pretty large companies that nobody even heard a peep about, that had some major implications. So I won't go into those details. But number two, the attacks can play out for weeks or months. So even if you are diligent, you may not even know you're being hacked. They come in, they grab what they want, and they leave. And then all of a sudden things pop up. And then I really think it's kind of an unprepared industry, logistics as a whole. I mean, you got the big integrators and the large, brands that people know out there. But there's a lot of folks that are still mom and pop trucking companies and family owned warehouse services and things that just aren't prepared or even understand the concept of cybersecurity and what the help me out here, buddy, implications are. So I think that we're going to see a lot more of it. We may not hear about it, but it's going to be interesting. So I think we need to keep our guard down, and we better watch out. So taken from your playbook, man, I'm a believer. What's your take on unprepared industry and cyber attacks increasing as we go out and throw one hell of a party here in 2020?
Yeah, the big watchword I think for everyone on this, what it ultimately comes down to is the difference between the word logistics and supply chain. I was on Twitter not long ago, which I try to avoid desperately because it's just a cesspool. But there's a couple of people I do like reading their takes on stuff. And one of the writers on the Journal of Commerce is Eric Johnson, and he does a lot on tech stuff. And he had a tweet up the other day. You just scan through stuff, and after a while, it tripped something back in my head. He said, there's a big difference between logistics and supply chain. And it was one of those things that was just like a throwaway when I first saw it. And then I was out, waddling up and down the road on my daily walk, like a tubby inspiration. And then it hit me, like it really is. The difference between those two words, I think we're beginning to mash them together way too much. So what you and I have done for most of our lives is logistics. It's things here, it's got to get here. And that's a really hard ask, but we're going to find a way to make it happen. Thank you for getting it prepared to move. Now we're going to find a way to get it where it needs to be. Your work is done here. Thank you. It's that part where something has been created and now it's got to get someplace. And that's a hard job. But supply chain is that whole part that happens, all of it, right? The whole all-encompassing bit where from the time that something is ordered or even thought of or created, depending on what egghead you talk to, that big, massive, all-connected thing. And what does that have to do with cybersecurity? Well, when you're unprepared, like you're talking about, every single node of the supply chain is interconnected inside of these systems now. Mm-hmm. And all it takes is one of those little chains that is connected to everybody else to get infected. And once it's infected, a lot of these hackers now, they're not going to immediately, most of them aren't going to immediately try to do anything. They're going to lay in wait and see how deep they can get into that supply chain. And when the time is right, then they'll do something. So why our industry is so targeted and why it's absolute, they lick their chops when they think about supply chain is because we've done such a great job of integrating. It makes us faster. It certainly makes us more effective, but it also makes us more dangerous. And because we're not, I shouldn't say we, because so many parts of who we are have not taken this seriously, have not made the investment, have not upgraded our infrastructure, we become an absolutely tantalizing target for people who would do bad things to us. Mm-hmm. And it's going to take one company who has not paid attention to all the warnings, because there have been a lot of people who've gotten in a lot of trouble, and it's going to blow up in our face. And I hate saying this, Doug, over and over again. We need that moment. We need that moment. The coronavirus pandemic was not the pandemic that it wasn't that, this was a dress rehearsal. And SolarWinds that just happened, that was our dress rehearsal, but no one paid attention to it. So I agree with you, man. This is probably the biggest Chicken Little warning, but unlike Chicken Little, when this sky falls, it is going to wreck global commerce.
Yeah. Well, we always like to say halftime, my friend. So I have something for the halftime, and I want to let people know you got some stuff coming up. I know not global trade this week. That's what we're on right now. But Friday, tell us what you got going on.
Yeah, Trade School brought to you by TAPA, Friday at 11 o'clock Eastern Time. You can learn more by either hitting me up on LinkedIn or going to the TAPA website. And every other Friday, we do a live training there. Also on Wednesday, I am doing a 9-week course brought to you by the good people at Alba Wheels Up, where I'm doing a basics of global trade. That's all it is, just basics. We're doing everything from import compliance, duty minimization, international trade, export compliance, you name it. And you can catch up on past episodes by going to Alba's LinkedIn page, and you can register for the ones coming up forward. Just dropped a new episode of the Trade Geek podcast, and we'll be dropping those every Tuesday going forward. How much more free crap could I give you people?
I don't know. Well, free crap's a good way to put it, man. But I don't think it's crap. If I've been a participant on your shows every Friday, and if the audience thinks we pontificate about some random stuff on this one, just there's a lot of that sprinkled into your good content. So
thanks.
Look forward to it.
How about you, Doug? What do you got going on?
Actually Wednesday. So, we got the Uptime Logistics, we got this podcast, and then I'm a guest speaker. The Denver Transportation Club is they have something called the DTC Download. So you can't do info lunches anymore, so they're info Zooms. And I'm going to talk about the dispersion that we're seeing across all kinds of industries, but how it specifically relates to supply chain and logistics. And that is noon Mountain Time. So denvertransportation.org. If you want to go check it out and sign up, no cost, obviously. And we'll see. It should be pretty interesting. My notes I'm putting together are pretty wild and thought-provoking, so hopefully you can join us.
Yeah, hey, I'll release stuff about this soon, but I'm actually booked on 3 live speeches. 3 live, like they're holding live events. So I don't know if we've got enough people vaccinated or people just don't care anymore, but come fall, I'll be back out there walking on stage, scaring the bejesus out of people again, I guess, Doug. So maybe you and I will be out there earning a living, shaking hands with masks on, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So I'm going to jump in here. We're going to do my topic 2, the third topic of the show. So I'm super excited. So air freight is back. But then I put a question mark by it, and I'm like, kind of back, maybe. I don't know. Right, so that's one interesting mode that is going to be coming out of the pandemic. So I guess got a couple of bullet points and doing a little bit of research on this. Read some information that there was 2,500 idle passenger aircraft that were flipped over to cargo, and I think the term is pre-freighter, so like a people freighter type of thing. So the question is, there's a lot of stuff that was converted. How fast can it be converted back, and is there enough demand through passenger travel to justify it converting back? So that's something there. There's these assets that have been used in the short term for something completely different than people. So the question is, what is going to happen with those 2,500 pieces of equipment? Now, I know, the freight's a little bit more profitable than people, but you want people to travel and everything else. So that's going to be interesting. What are you going to do with the equipment? The other piece is fuel costs. Fuel's going up. March of 2020 to March of 2021, the cost per barrel has jumped $33. So that's great. You got the summer, great, being facetious if you're in that industry. And, summer always gas prices shoot up because people are traveling the whole 9 yards. So there's 2 things with this. Number one, there's going to be more and more emphasis on separating the cost of the service versus the cost of the fuel, right? You can't control fuel, so if the rate per kilo is $10, you can bet the service providers are going to identify that 20% of that is fuel, so it's really not the real rate. You're looking at an $8 type of rate. So that's going to be a big point. And then everybody says, what about hedging on the fuel, right? You hedge fuel prices. Well, there was no money to hedge fuel a year ago, so that safety net doesn't really exist anymore. So I think air freight is going to continue to be more expensive. You tack on the fuel increases. So what's going to happen with it? I think that you're going to see a couple things. One, You're going to see vertical integration. I think the biggest example of that is Prime Air, with Amazon saying, we're just going to take care of it ourselves, right? If we can't handle or deal with the volatility, we can control our own cost. I think you're going to see some new providers. As crazy as it is and capital intensive as it is, there's going to be new providers. And I think there's going to be dedicated contracts where companies are going to pop up and say, listen, I'll give you one hell of a deal. And if I can have regular ongoing lanes from A to B, I can control my costs, and I can mitigate the cost increase of the air freight. So I think you're going to see more companies like Amazon integrate vertically. You're going to see some new providers out there. Maybe even go into the Uber model where you and I can become pilots, and we'll make some regional or smaller puddle jump deliveries for air freight. But the consumption in the e-commerce isn't going away. You can't virtually move a package. So those are my thoughts on air freight. So is it back? Yeah, kinda, maybe, but we'll have to wait and see. But it's going to be an interesting time in air freight this summer.
Yeah, I love all those takes. I think the one I'm still waiting on is when we allow passenger traffic between countries again, because the profitability on that cargo when you're stuffing a belly full of cargo much higher, and our ability to bring that back is still in question. So many countries have not been able to be as effective in vaccinating people as we have. UK certainly has, but a lot of other nations have not. So when are we going to open that gateway again and start getting cargo moving back and forth? Could not agree with you more that the pricing is so good right now, and the ability to be profitable in air freight is so good right now. It just stands to reason that people are going to get engaged in this. It's a supply and demand issue. If you can lease aircraft, if you can get engaged, you're gonna convert aircraft. You're going to get aircraft up in the air, or lease them, or whatever you've got to do in order to engage in those markets where there's just not enough supply and demand is high. We're going into those heavy seasons right now, and people are scrambling to find space. So you're going to have people who are looking for aircraft cargo to move it. I'm just blown away. I mean, every day you're reading that people are traveling interstate right now, more and more, as more people get vaccinated to go see grandma, visit family members, get away from home. They didn't take proper vacations last year. They just want to go someplace and stare at one another someplace other than their own house for a little while. So that's certainly the case. But when it comes to cargo, passenger is king. So until we can get that back, I think those pricing still going to remain an issue. But you're right. They'll make up for it in other ways, because the pandemic might have slowed down the global economy, but it apparently did not slow down consumption as much as we thought it would. So I think that's a spot on take, Doug. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, sir. We got
all right,
a little bit of agreement on this one. Take us home. Take us home.
Number four, touchy, but we've had a rough couple of weeks here in Northern Ireland, and it's all because of Brexit. So when Brexit first happened, the first couple of weeks were really brutal, in that you had a major disruption to European logistics, and it was met with the attitude of, we knew there were going to be problems, but we weren't going to be able to necessarily manage them until we were knee deep in the issue. So now that we're in it, we're going to learn how to cope with it and get through it. But one of the big problems that we've still been unable to really get our arms around is Northern Ireland, the backstop problems and all the rest that went along with it. No matter how much effort was put into it, no matter how much planning was put into it, all of that, we'll deal with it when it comes to it, has not really been an effective strategy with dealing with Northern Ireland, which, for those of you who are not aware, is still part of the United Kingdom and therefore part of the Brexit issue. A lot of cargo went into Northern Ireland first on its way into Ireland, which is part of the European Union, as many of you are probably aware, not aware. So over the past couple of weeks, it has degenerated into violence, into rioting and disruption. And it's gotten to where there are people who are now completely circumventing Northern Ireland to deliver goods and going straight to Ireland to do it, and then trying to distribute goods from there, which of course slows down supply chains and has created disruption into getting things into the hands of people who need them. It's a nightmare scenario, and it's forcing Great Britain to get down to brass tacks and renegotiate much quicker and accelerate negotiations with the European Union. What is difficult is Boris Johnson sits down with the European Union and they have these conversations, and what comes out of it is the typical, oh, we had a lovely conversation. All right, well, what did you decide? Lovely conversation. Great. But what are we going to do about fixing this? Lovely conversation. So it just seems that every time they talk, there really isn't any kind of, plan or any sort of thing that we can hang our hat on saying, here's when it's going to get better. And when that happens, the people who are suffering because of it, it only riles them up more. And when you add past political issues that go along with it, and really decades, if not centuries of animosity, it really creates what could become a boiling point over both a political issue, a trade issue, a supply chain issue, and honestly, what could really be seen as an ethnic issue that goes back a very, very long time.
Interesting. Yeah, my wife laughs at me because I'm a big Reddit consumer, and it's to see the funny videos on dogs and cats and stuff like that. But there was a Reddit video where some gal was getting ready to bungee jump off of a building or a bridge or something. And the whole premise was she's ready. She gets a little push, and then she freaks out and she holds on, and she falls about 20 feet, kind of gets tied up in the rope, and then just plunges to the bottom. So just while you're talking just now, I thought of that. And as an analogy for what's going on is that the hard Brexit, it's kind of like, let's just get the hell off this ledge and let's give it a shot, and we'll deal with the unintended consequences as we're falling through space to figure it out. So you're a lot more well-versed on this topic than I am, Pete. But I think what'll happen is those fine conversations will continue to happen. There'll be some workarounds. There'll be some patchwork. They'll try to mitigate the violence, but it's just an example of not having your shit together before you jumped off to enjoy the bungee ride. So I think it'll continue to happen. There'll be some ebbs and flows of this thing, but it's going to continue to be interesting for sure.
What's scary is there are lives in the balance, and most of what happened before, it felt like a financial problem, and people had a relatively positive attitude about, we'll get the food where it needs to be, we'll get the goods where it needs to be. But now what's boiling up is centuries old problems that could really very quickly turn into both the type of political animosity that could really send this thing into the dumpster quick. So I'll be watching this one closely. And as I hear more, I'll be sharing stuff on LinkedIn about it. And, Doug and I, for those of you who are watching, we're very good about putting new information up on LinkedIn and sharing it with you. And I think this is one I'll be watching really closely. Nice. So that'll do it for us on episode whatever we're at so far on Global Trade This Week, brought to you by Cap Logistics, who we are very, very appreciative of for continuing to have faith in us to not embarrass them deeply every week as we put on this show, and for loaning us the Wunderkind, the magic 11-year-old that is Keenan, to continue to produce our television show between his periods in junior high school as he puts this all together. I think Keenan, I don't know if he's going to get to go to his junior prom this year because of COVID. I hope he gets to. And if he does, Doug and I are going to loan him our ruffled powder blue tuxedos to wear, if that's the case. And I don't know if he'll get to have Faithfully as by Journey as his prom song, but one can only hope. But thank you again for joining us for another wonderful week. And Doug, thank you as always for sitting here and being my ride or die on this show. You make it a lot more fun. Love it. Yeah. And we'll see you all again next week for another exciting episode of Global Trade This Week, brought to you by our good friends at Cap Logistics. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks, everybody.